Okay, so welcome to the Ultra Running Sam podcast, Kim Collison.
Hello, how are we doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Just been out for a nice morning run, loosen the legs off, and now ready to talk to you.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, how far did you go, and what did you do? What would you run?
It was a 10 miles almost, just in across the fields and along some trail, and a nice easy one with the brother-in-law and sister-in-law.
Nice, a nice social run in the holidays.
Yes, social Christmas holidays run.
Yeah, I had one similar a couple of days ago. Running to there's a pub that a few of my running buddies we all seem to just gravitate towards, like in the countryside in Derbyshire, and there's a few different routes where you can get to it, but basically they all converge on this old pub that was said to be one of the a lot of pubs claim to be the oldest pub in England, but this is one of the ones that claims to have been Dick Turpin's pub of choice back in a long time ago. It's all stone walls and big open fires and everything. So, but the queue was about 20 minutes to get to the bar, so it wasn't as fun as it normally is, with it being the holidays. Bit busy. But anyway, so for listeners and viewers that might not know who you are, I'm sure people that are listening and watching do know who you are. Could you sort of give us a bit of a rundown on your origin story, so shall we say, where you came from, how you got into running, and where you are now, sort of thing?
Oh, I started running as a kid. Learned very quickly I was good at cross country, had plenty of endurance, wasn't very good at ball games. I didn't have quite that coordination, but I was very good at chasing a football around the pitch. So yeah, you soon gravitate to what you enjoy. So did sort of county cross country and good around the school, then got into a little bit of adventure racing in late teens, sort of pre-university, so a multi-sport, bike, run, orienteer. I was in the Scouts, so did lots of mountain trips, Lake District, Wales. That was when I was living in Hertfordshire, so always got that grounding in adventure and navigation and being outside, but then also that competition and running side. I guess then university and travel happened, so I fell out of competing and running training for probably about 7 years as other interests took over. And then I think it must have been 2008, I landed back in the Lake Districts, started working Outward Bound, and then started running, biking and training. So, when you're obsessive and do lots of activity, you start to build fitness, and Bob Graham came around to follow my dad's footsteps, and so you get that bug of long distance endurance, and that reward of success when you finish something like that. You then got into a lot of fell races as well, that short, fast running, flying up and down hills. But then there's always that adventure race goal of long distance endurance and multi-day stuff. It was bike, run, paddle, but journeying and teams of 4. So that got me that bug of the long journey adventure, and really enjoying that side of being in nature and having to find how far you can push yourself to reach your finish line. So I guess there's the two angles came together, with the performance side being very competitive with the fell running, and then the adventure. And then eventually I kind of drifted more into the running and away from adventure racing, just partly cost and partly running was always the flow sport for me, where I get that joy from doing and being and in that moment in the mountains.
So the adventure racing then, that was is that something that you kind of knew that you'd come to the end of that kind of phase of your life, or is it something that you think that you could go back to eventually, or is this just like it was part of your development into, you know, the ultra runner that
I
you are?
mean, I still would go back into it, and at some point I can see myself getting back on a bike and paddling again and starting training towards those. I guess the thing that made it was the cost and time away. You one of those races is a week long. You then perhaps away for a couple of weeks, and quite remote places. So it's kind of the cost element of having bikes, paddles. It wasn't the right. It became too hard to do and justify. So
it's like an even more expensive version of triathlon, if
yeah,
that could be possible.
yeah, to some degree it can become like that. So you kind of go, okay, I like competing. What can I do more of, and less restrictive as well? I mean, basically a pair of shoes and a bum bag or a vest, and you can pretty be much away on most events. Obviously the spine is slightly different. It becomes a bit more towards the adventure side with the amount of kits, but still it's not a bike and a kayak.
I think there's a few, I've known a few people over the years, because that was kind of my intro into ultra running, was that I'd sort of got friends that were doing like short triathlon, like sprint and Olympic distance, and then started to work the way up to like doing a full Ironman, and I did like the full long course distance a couple of times. But at that point I'd got young children, and I'd kind of realized how much time I'd put into training over the year for just like marginal increases in performance over those couple of years. And I thought I probably need to focus on the thing that probably the thing I was good at was the cycling part, but I knew that running was the kind of gives you the most bang for your buck, because you can go out for a 30-minute run, an hour run, and you know that you're sorted. Whereas on a bike, you've got to be gone for hours, aren't you, to get that sort of same kind of fitness developments and adaptations. So I think, I know a few people that have kind of gone down that route and realized that they had, all those years of that endurance training has made them become a really good, ultra distance endurance runner. So do you think that background that you had has really played into the career that you've now got as an ultra runner then?
Yeah, I mean the volume, and it helped you create a huge engine, and that you could handle hours and hours of stress and recover from it and go again. So it definitely, I think the multi-sport element also made you strong for the running. With the paddling, you had a lot of core rotation in the upper body, which then fed into the legs, and the biking gave you a different set of muscles that all built into so it did complement it. And I mean, hours and hours on the bike all adds into creating the athlete you are, a huge base of endurance fitness that you can then use for the running.
And then hopefully it keeps you sort of injury free as well when you've got that kind of transition as well, because I think the danger is when people get into ultra running, they're like, this world of ultra running's opened up to me, and they go absolutely mad and just enter all the races that they can get into, and then end up like a year down the line getting injured. But I suppose if you've got that kind of background and that base already built in, and a strong core and legs, then it's gonna help, isn't it, massively?
However, you say that, when I did transition away from the biking and the paddling, the injuries, I started having injury problems, which then I had to work out. I needed to add in some strength resistance training as my extra to help with the injury prevention.
Yeah, yeah.
And keep the mechanics good.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's obviously something that all ultra runners sometimes fall short of. Is doing our due diligence with our strength work. I know, and I say this every single episode I record, that I'm not going to talk about my injuries, but sometimes it always comes out that I've had on and off trouble with like imbalances from years of doing triathlon and then doing running. Stuff to do with my hamstrings and knees and everything, and stuff being not quite in balance and out of line. And I thought that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing with strength work, but I realised that I'm not doing quite enough of what I should be doing, and doing really heavy leg stuff to just get that strength in there, rather than just, I think probably what I've been doing is kind of more like rehab exercises rather than strength work. So for the new year starting, that's something that I have been working on it this year, but I'm really going to focus on it for next year to try and get strong legs. But enough about me. This isn't about me. It's about you. So as far as like your races that you've done, then I mean your CV for the races that you've done over the years, like with the Lakeland races, you're a trail running champion, Arc of Attrition, on races, Lakeland 24-hour record, Bob Graham, Paddy Buckley. So you basically done, all of those bucket list races and routes that people want to do as an ultra and a trail runner. Which one of those has been, is your favorite, or which one were you most kind of obsessed with as you went through?
I mean, one of my favorites obviously would be the Lakeland 24-hour record, being the history behind it, and being in that peak condition and shape post lockdown. That's always going to be a highlight of a career, that when that finish line kind of feeling, and that was the one that will stick in your memory forever. That moment, that's probably a highlight. I mean, probably another one of the highlight races for me was a race in Andorra that doesn't happen anymore, called Els 2900.
Heard that, yeah.
And that was a pairs race, linking up the 7 highest mountains in Andorra that are above 2,900, with a fair bit of scrambling and alpine running. And so it was kind of absorbing mentally and physically, and that you were managing your consequences and risks. So it was, you had that everything to it as on the extreme end of running.
Do those kind of races appeal to you then, like the kind of like the multi-day, like Tour de Jet type stuff, that and the spine and everything, that your sort of background in an adventure racing and going multi-day has really set you up for that kind of? Do you feel like that's giving you an advantage then for those kind of races? Because as some runners have come into the longer races, they perhaps haven't got that same experience that you have had of those really hard multi-day self-nav type things.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that having that background and experience certainly helps and plays into it. I don't have that fear of can I do this or not? And I know I've been to some pretty hard places in races and challenges, and being able to pull through it if I want to. I think more my downside is actually probably the performance ego of also being a competitor, and being able to race fast or relatively fast over a fell race, and trying to match the endurance element and the pacing to the competitive ego of wanting to win now kind of thing, and not in 3 days time. And I think that's always my balance, which is the adventure racing was all okay because I had three other people that acted as the limiter, and I controlled it. Whereas something like Tour de Jante and the Spine, there's just me, and that's the hard thing. So I never go into it with the fear, which probably also acts as a problem because it allows you to try and race and push, and then you have the downsides of when you get it wrong.
Speaking of when it doesn't always go to plan, obviously last year in the Spine race, we met very briefly at the start because I was one of the guys taping the jackets on. So hopefully it wasn't me that put yours on. If it was uncomfortable, I'll blame somebody else. But obviously everybody was watching you and Damo last year. What actually happened then with that, where you were sort of going backwards and back and forth between the two of you?
Well, I tried to not start out fast, but within 500 meters, I was just behind Damon and Eugenie, and Damon turns around and sort of beckons me up, and so I end up with Damon, and then Damon puts his foot down up Jacob's ladder to get rid of Eugenie, and lo and behold, we're together, and we're very similar paced athletes and have run together quite a lot now. And so automatically we fall into pace. But I think I stopped for a wee just before Black Hill, and Damon sees it as an opportunity 2 hours into the race or 3 hours into the race to try and lose me. So he puts his foot down, and then I'm putting my foot down to try and catch up because I've just stopped for a wee, and literally the ego kicks in. I can't be left behind at this stage. So we've both worked really hard for the next hour until finally we're back reunited. But that hour has probably done us both in to some degree. That tells its story later on in the race. Damon with his groin and me with my legs, but at that point we're both then, once we're together, we're working together and waiting for each other and getting to sync. But I think there was also that gremlin of Eugenie and putting space into people. So although we are running together, we probably almost both were pushing each other a little bit too hard for the distance, and then eventually that caught up with me sooner than Damon. And I remember coming out of Horton, and I wasn't very well, and I was kind of vomiting, and the legs were seizing up, and I kind of knew that point that that the game was over, and I had a valuable kind of learning experience. I waved Damon goodbye, and off you go, thinking he'd go off and win it from that point. But it was kind of the penny dropped when I'd been into Hawes, had a sleep, got up, and sorry, my dog's barking here.
Yeah, don't worry. We allow dogs on the show.
And you get up and you're sitting around, and then Ian Keith come in and do his stuff, have a sleep, and you're just about to go home. And the eventual winner is at that stage several hours behind where you were, thinking actually all I need to do is take a few % off here and be healthy and in reasonable shape, and I'm still going to be ahead of where Ian is at that point in the race. And you think, well, yeah, okay, I did a very good 100-mile race, but it's not a 100-mile race.
That's a different race. So if, all your years of of racing then, and racing tactics and everything, do you still feel like you've either got something to learn, or do you just think that you kind of kick yourself when you make the same mistake that you've made time and time again before, and you swore you would never swore you would never make that mistake again with pacing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really careful balance, because it's that we're wanting in a race to compete versus in a race to complete. And I think there's always that part of me of, I want to compete. So there's always that degree of being on that red line and risking it, and willing to take the consequences of getting it wrong sometimes.
Because sometimes it does go absolutely right as well, doesn't it? When you make a choice like that, where you go for the competitive choice rather than the most sensible choice at the right time, and it turns out okay, doesn't it? Sometimes.
Yeah. And as I say, sometimes you break a record or win the race, or but other times you get pushed too far. You're not the, UTMB is the classic one. Everyone wants to do the best at UTMB, but only a handful can do really well. But you get dragged along quicker than you should because of that wanting to do. And it's not until 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours later, because you're still very strong and fit, and you can keep going to that level at that red line. But then suddenly you've crossed the tipping point, and you run out of energy, or the muscular damage is too much for what you had that capabilities. And so it's trying to handle. I think, the difficult line is that psychology side for me, and trying to find that balance of what's right for me at that distance. Which is always the problem, isn't it, with racing, getting the pacing correct.
Yeah, because you can think one race, you think, oh, that went absolutely like perfection, and you just think that if you apply those same principles to the next race, that it will work out the same, and it doesn't work like that, does it? Ultras are very different beasts, aren't they, from one race to the next? Even a race that you've done that's an identical race, that can still throw spanners in the works, can't it?
Yes.
What's your plans for the Spine race then this year? Because obviously we are, how many days out are we?
2.5 weeks now, are we?
Yeah. How many days it was? Yeah. So it's imminent. How's preparation gone for it this year?
I mean, I was getting in the swing of some really good training from October. Late October into November, early December. I was having a really good 8 weeks of training, consistent. The motivation was up. I was into that swing of, okay, I'm building training here. After I got over that disappointment of Tour de Jante, and the recovery from that took a bit longer than I hoped, physically and mentally. But once I was past that, I was getting into a really good pattern with a good volume and some intensity there as well. But then, I say a week ago, I just come out, or 2 weeks ago, I had a nasty bout of COVID. So I had about 8, 9 days of not being able to train at all, with proper full-on symptoms. And so then this 4 or 5 days post that, trying to ease back into some training. But then I've had a couple of good harder runs before Christmas. And so I'm feeling good and recovered now, and but you're almost in that stage of, okay, the race is getting close. How much training can I get away with and still then be fresh enough for the race? So yeah, I've probably got another 7 to 10 days of good training to do before I make sure I just completely rest and
ready for it fresh. I think I was saying to our mutual friend Paul Howlett, the guy from Youth Hostels. I was saying to him about, because he's obviously doing the spine, and he'd had a stomach bug, and I was saying to him, in the grand scheme of things, like, you've trained for this race all year. Having a week off with a stomach bug is not really going to have any detrimental effect on your training, as long as you allow your body time to recover from it and go back into it steadily again. What was your feelings? When you got COVID, did you think the worst, or did you sort of think, it's just a bump in the road?
Yeah, though there's always that natural feeling of, oh my no, it's the end of the world kind of thing. I've got a bug and it's prime peak week and like, but then I've been in this scenario so much, that there's always something that can come up. So I've got I'm quite quick to accept that I've got COVID. Yes, I get a little bit frustrated that you're ill and you don't want to be ill and you want to be running, but you have to go, okay, what can I do? At the moment, I've just got to rest, recover, sleep, do all the things that that you have to try and make yourself well as quickly as possible, and just go, okay, there's a time course here, and then be really careful coming out the other side. Like for me, it was, okay, let's monitor my heart rate, because what I found was my legs were really fresh, wanted to roll over quite quickly, but at that normal turnover pace, the heart rate was already elevating. So it was just having that, okay, body's not right yet, keep the effort down, keep it easy, start building the volume, and then once everything's settled back down, you're then good to go. So it's just trying, okay, what can I do to be prepared? And with the spine, there's lots of other things that it's such a long race that as you say, a week out, in terms of, okay, I'm going to lose a percentage of fitness. I might not be, if I was doing a marathon, it might have had a bigger impact on your getting your PB or something like that. But the spine, sleep deprivation, your food management, your hydration, all the faffing is going to have a far bigger percentage impact on the race outcome than that 0.5% of fitness that you might have lost in that week of COVID. So trying to zoom out and have a bigger picture really helps, I think, when you're in that moment of, oh no, I'm in here now, how can we zoom out? Oh yeah, I've got a whole 10 years of training history versus 1 week. You start to see, actually, get a grip, it's fine, move on, focus on what you can control, and you'll be fine. And it is what it is.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Did you think you're because obviously you're a coach, aren't you? So do you find yourself having to kind of remind yourself of the things that you're telling the guys that you coach of when it comes to things like this, in preparing for big races and bumps in the road and things like that? Is that something that, do you sort of feel a twinge of guilt when you feel like you're saying something that you've heard your own coaching clients sort of complain about, and you've told them to sort of get over it or do this and do that? Do you feel like you bring yourself to account sometimes because of that?
Yeah, and sometimes that works in the sense that you do listen to it and you get a bit more wise, and you go, actually, what would I tell my coaching clients? And definitely the coming out of it and that zooming out and that controlling the anxieties, I'm definitely able to do it, but I still have that type A athlete of being a pusher. So, for example, I probably wouldn't have had such a bad bout of COVID. I had initial symptoms, started to get better, had that, oh, I need to be training for a spine, went out and did a big long day with the pack in the mountains, which then tipped me over the edge clearly, and I went rapidly downhill with severe symptoms. So if I'd been following my own advice and like, okay, you've got symptoms, just be careful early, that would have been a lot shorter scale of time out. And you go, right, it's always easy to look back on it and go, okay, that's where I went wrong. And that's the benefit of having a coach sometimes, isn't it? Is having that external perspective and another opinion.
It's better to have somebody nudging you, I suppose, isn't it? Than hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it? That we all fall danger to sometimes. How did you actually get into coaching then? Is this something that you've always wanted to do right from the start of when you started trail running? Or is it just something that's just come along with all the years of being in the mountains and being around people and
yeah, I mean, working for Outward Bound for a decade and was always coaching kids on a weekly basis through the adventure in the mountains, through the camping, through the climbing, and it was all about the soft skills and developing their comfort zones and communication skills. And so there's always that working with young people, but it was always a short-term basis. You see them for a week, you perhaps see a difference in some of them, but you never got the long-term development side. So there was always that interest in developing others, and so coaching was kind of a natural progression, in a sport that I'm really clearly passionate about and really enjoy and have developed experience and knowledge about. How I could then help others achieve their ambitions and dreams and make a career out of it. So it was that stage of, okay, how can I transition towards that and help create smiles for others as well as myself, which then also helped drive that personal growth side in terms of, okay, how do I expand my own knowledge base and work on my areas of weakness that there isn't n equals 1. How do I learn the more the science side rather than the coaching and the soft skills side? Where do I need to improve and develop and become a better coach, which then also feeds into your own athletics yourself. And that, I think, at Outward Bound, that had got to its climax where how far I wanted to develop, whereas this gave me a whole exponential to learn and grow and expand knowledge.
Yeah, because you can just read books and listen to podcasts for hours and hours, can't you, about coaching? There's always something changing, always some new, like research paper that comes out. There's always something where you can always be sort of broadening your knowledge in that respect.
Yeah, and the more you start to read and different books, and you then start getting the links joining up between the different theories and papers, and you start improving the understanding of the bigger picture, and rather than just the basic initial models, and when you think you know it all, and then you have the Dunning-Kruger effects when you suddenly realize that you don't know it all, and you suddenly dip down, and then you start building and expanding, and as the years tick by, you suddenly start having more and more skill in it. And, you know, that's like any development, isn't it, where you read more and try and expand your development.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your kind of, I know this is probably a horrible question to ask a coach, but what is your kind of training philosophy then? Have you got a kind of a basic idea of how you approach a person when they come to you and say, because obviously you have to figure out whether you're the right fit for each other. What's your approach to coaching, the way that you would explain it to somebody who wanted to be coached by you?
That is a difficult one. I guess it's the first one is actually trying to understand what the goals of the person are and what they actually want from the coaching, and whether it's actually more that personal support, whether it's the motivation side, whether it's performance. So it's trying to first that understanding. You know, are we on that same picture? Can I form rapport with this person? Have I got that skill set that will actually bring them value, or do they actually need a different skill set? And so it's just trying to get that assessment. I guess more now it's okay, where does this person, do I think I can add value? Have I got interest in helping develop them? Because if there's, because it's got to be a two-way relationship, hasn't it? Because then the more that they want, the more you want to be able to help them. So it's that side. It's then trying to assess where are the low-hanging fruit for this particular person. How can I get the right training adaptations for them? Do they need actually more of the low aerobic work to become better metabolic engines, or actually is it their speed side and their mechanics that they're lacking because they're ultra runners and they know how to keep running, and actually it's the top end engine? Is it their ceiling that's letting them down, and or is it trying to get that right balance between the two for them? Is it trying to go, okay, they've actually really well developed as an athlete, what are the smaller things that I can start to change and try to try and help them? Is it you know, a lack of experience? You know, is it someone that's done a lot of running, done ultra running, but they're coming to the spine but haven't got their adventure background, they haven't got that self-management skills of looking at themselves in bad weather and carrying a big pack? So actually, do they need to do a lot of specific training with a pack in the environment to cut out the inefficiencies? And you know, it's that trying to identify that individualization, I think, is the key for the training, rather than coming in, this is my style. How can I imply my style onto them? It's going, this is your individual. How can I develop this individual with the toolbox that I know? And that's kind of, I guess, my philosophy. And then it's, how can I expand my toolbox to be able to have more tools to help this person?
It's never ending, isn't it?
It is never ending, and
literally never ending. So your coaching business then is so is that something that you're doing kind of locally in where you live, in like in the lakes and everything, or is this something that you're helping people sort of up and down the country or around the world? How does that work?
Yeah, it's mainly nationally, so people from around the country. It's a remote coaching business, so a real range of locations. It's always nice to meet up with athletes if they're in the Lake Districts. You know, a fair number live in the Lake District, so I will meet up with them for runs and coffees, and so you get that one-to-one in person rapport building. But then others, it's not possible, and you do it from a distance. But that's the good thing of IT and technology that makes this possible for us as a coaching industry now.
Yeah, it makes it more accessible to a lot more people, doesn't it? So your location then, whereabouts are you? Where's your nearest fell then? Where's your nearest mountain that you can get to quickest?
It would be Suter Fell, which is literally 500 meters from my doorstep. I'm onto the fell and up onto Suter Fell, which then leads on to Blencathra. So I'm on top of Blencathra in under an hour if I want to. So yeah, it's that hills are not a problem for my training where I live. Sometimes actually the flat running is more the issue than the hill training.
Trying to find somewhere flat in the lake. Yeah.
I do. I mean, I have some lanes and rolling roads. They're never completely flat. There's always a degree or two of angle on those roads, but that the classes is where I can manage a even consistent effort and actually run. So at certain times of the year I'll do more on the road and the lanes, and then less on the mountain. But it's trying to get that right balance for you, and trying to work on your own weaknesses.
Yeah.
My inclination was always going to be head for Blencathra and the hills, but that doesn't necessarily make you quicker.
Yeah. Do you think is there that danger that you just think that you could just get stuck in this, not in a rut, but stuck in a routine of just always going up straight up the nearest hill and mountain and not concentrating on things that, like you say, having weaknesses? Do you find yourself having to force yourself to do the speed work and stuff on flatter terrain and things like that to build up your engine and everything?
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's important to consciously think about the flatter side of running as well. You know, a lot of running is about horizontal power, even when you're running up a hill. There's a large portion of the angle is still horizontal power over vertical. So if you're kind of not working on those elements, you're missing out on key adaptions and speed, which then transfer into being able to run up a hill quickly, especially if your primary inclination, because of the joy of being in the mountains and running uphill, you develop a lot of that strength endurance from doing it. So often that's not where my weaknesses are. So it's trying to be aware of where your natural tendencies are, and then trying to remember to work on those weaknesses, because that's probably your lowest hanging fruit to do. I think often we get trapped in that, trying to do too much specific work and not working on basic fundamentals of running, of speed, of flat running and tempos and that side. We can, I do it myself, get trapped into that. Let's just keep running up and down hills. At certain times that's important. If I've got a big, say, UTMB in the 6 to 8 weeks before that race, yes, I want to be really focusing on getting the up and downs in, primarily for those downhill adaptations and being able to withstand the eccentric loading on the muscles and getting that trained. But if I'm doing that 12 months of the year, I'm losing somewhere. You start detraining and side of, okay, now I can't run so fast over a 5k. That's, doesn't have an immediate impact, but it will do over time.
Yeah, absolutely. So just thinking about the specifics of that then, so when you start introducing things like strength work and those kind of workouts, a lot of, I mean, I've had this myself, like after doing like a really heavy like leg session in the gym, and then feeling like, obviously you've got the 3 days of the DOMs coming from that. How do you work as far as from your coaching point of view? How do you work in putting heavy weights and the strength work into a routine of running where it doesn't have a detrimental effect on the rest of the week for their run training?
Yeah, it's kind of trying to get that balance where it's supportive of the training rather than detrimental to it. I mean, if you're doing the strength work and then suddenly we're now getting 3 days, 4 days worth of DOMs, you kind of think, actually, I'm not getting enough of the specific work that you need, or that will really benefit the running. So you actually, okay, I'm doing the strength training and I'm getting stronger at strength, but am I then losing too much from not running enough or training, being able to do the hard sessions? So there's that element of, okay, if I know I'm going to be coming back or starting to do the harder strength training, it's got to be in a quieter time of the year, as far away from your goal event, where, okay, can I improve the general strength here, then get it to a stage where the recovery from it becomes like a normal hard session, that you recover quickly from it, but still get the little benefits of it. So it's then, the key is then, I think, finding what level of maintenance for that strength work works, so that it now becomes just an average session that helps, and then how minimal of it can I do but still maintain that level of quality, while I focus on different adaptations that are more important to the race. So in a peak period of training, it might be once a week I maintain some form of harder strength training. Probably my go-to now is probably it being a second session, so it would be the same day as a session, to concentrate the stress on that one day. Yes, you'll lose a bit of quality in the strength training, but I want to prioritize the quality in the run training and try and create as much space between the two and as much food to try and make sure that second session is still good, that it has benefit, and so that hopefully then you have your normal level of recovery days of easier running post that, before the next harder day.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I'd read that as well, that's coaches are sort of, if you're going to do strength work, do it on the day when you're doing a session, so that you then have the days after that to actually recover from that hard day, rather than trying to put a strength work session in and then doing a speed session the next day, and then you've got double the amount and a less amount of time during the week to recover from those things. If you put them together, spread out in one day, you've got more chance of recovering from that hard day with your easy recovery days after that.
But you've also got to look at that the quality side of it, the recoverability of the athlete, how fit are they, because for many athletes, doing the 2 sessions in one day is just going to be too much intensity, and that strength work will almost be pointless because you just won't be able to challenge yourself enough because you're too fatigued. So actually doing it on the consecutive day gives enough time to recover, to have 2 quality days, and then have the 2 recovery days after that. If you think that strength is the right thing of value for that person, that is going to be more beneficial than not, then that might be a better programming for that person to get the best out of each of those sessions, than trying to cram it into one day. But also, for some people, it's a choice of actually, is heavy strength training the right thing for that person? And quite often that the answer to that is no. They might be having a quite physical, manual, heavy job where actually they're getting a lot of strength training all day long. They're strong enough then for the running. Do they need that extra stress from that? So it's trying to remember, what is the individual? Is this right? Is this going to add that extra percentage for them? A lot of people manage without strength training, and do very well by doing more specific strength. So can you build in sprinting? Can you build in strength-based drills, and look at the strength endurance from that side? There's different ways to target what you want.
There's more than one way to skin a cat, as me granddad used to say. And it all comes down to individualization, doesn't it? And the big question of it depends. There's always a variable in there with everybody.
And can you be consistent with it?
Yeah.
Because in some ways, doing 6 weeks of pure strength work and then not doing it again for the rest of the year is like, why do the 6 weeks of strength work? Because every year you're just coming back round in that same circle. It's going, what can I build and maintain and keep consistent with?
The best program is the one that you can stick to, and the best routine, something that you can consistently stick to.
And for some, it's actually doing the rehab conditioning specific to that individual to work on, okay, these are my imbalances. What physio type exercises do I know that help me keep control of that allows me to keep running this load? And that might be the right level of strength for that person.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's decisions and choices. There's so many to make.
Too many. For you personally, then, have you got like a go-to workout or like session or day or route that you like to do before a big race? So like building up to the spine. Is there anything that you've had on your calendar that you've been really looking forward to doing, like a certain session or like a day where you're in the mountains doing X and Y? Is there something that you've had that once you've hit it, you're like, I feel confident that it's going to go well?
No, not specifically. I don't try and, in my head, I think this is one of those things that helps me in a way, is that I don't have that key go-to session or benchmark that tells me yes or no, this is going to be a good race, because then there's the downside of you then can put in your head that, oh, that wasn't a very good session. just for whatever reason you've just had slightly bad sleep, or and then that has that psychological knock-on impact of onto the race. So there's that element of general feeling of confidence in the work you've done as a whole, that has a bigger impact on, yes, I've done the work, I can feel the training having an impact, I'm feeling good on those key or those workouts where you're trying to push yourself, right? Yeah, now I'm in good shape. What have I got to do? What can I do now with what shape I've got come race day? I think that for me is more of a holistic feeling and confidence in the overall work than a single session.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. I'm aware that I'm like taking up a lot of your time by asking a lot of coaching questions. Moving on to, obviously, January, you got the spine. What else have you got planned for the rest of next year then?
Yeah, that's kind of the dilemma of always like, which angle and direction do I want to go? I think I've kind of decided that I want to try and work on my thresholds a little bit. Again, in the post spine, to try and make sure that I'm looking after my ceiling again. You try not to get into the trap of long race after long race and long challenge, and slowly the degeneration of your capacities. So I think I'm going to target 3 peaks on a kind of, it's a hard marathon distance race that's fast and kind of will challenge me to work on those top ends. And just out of interest, can I get somewhere close to my PB kind of time? It's going to be a very competitive race this year. It's a GB trial race for the world champs, so there's going to be a lot of quality athletes there. I don't have the ambitions of winning it, but just to enjoy that, being in amongst a big race of that speed, nature, and racing. So hopefully then that will carry on that into the summer. And then I've got a UTMB rollover place from 2020 and COVID years that I finally, this is the final year. If I don't take it now, it's gone. And it's a race where I've always got that, can I really get it nailed this time? And so I've got to just go and run it one time, and I just really want to go there and enjoy the race, and see if I can control my inner chimp at that race, knowing full well that that's going to be a really hard challenge in itself. So that would be my main late season goal. There is potential for, I'll probably want to do a Ramsey, like solo unsupported, just for the adventure side. I'm not going to be challenging Finley Wild's FKT on that. It's just I haven't done this one. It would be a really cool adventure. Let's do this as part of training for something else. And then maybe I'll look at something multi-day late autumn for next year.
So that's the goal.
So perhaps, maybe shorter stuff building up to UTMB would be my idea for next year. I do really want to go back to Tour de Jante. because it's just amazing adventure in beautiful alpine territory, and it's clearly still unfinished business. But UTMB's come up, and I've got to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just finally, then, what are your predictions for the Spine race?
I talk a good talk of trying to go easy and controlling the monkey, but I can see me, Damon, and Jack Scott spending a fair amount of time together before it finally splits up, and one of us three probably being the favourites to, or the rabbits, should I say, to take the win this year. I mean, me and Damon can't get it wrong 2 years in a row. One of us has at least got to get to the end this time.
I hope so, yeah.
Jack's a young, wise head on young shoulders, and is clearly running very, very well at the moment. He's quick on the fell races. He's got the experience of doing multi-day, long endurance stuff. So there's I've put us as the rabbits, but then there's a whole bunch of very strong, experienced multi-day athletes. Obviously, clearly Ian is going to be consistent and will finish strongly. But there's always the likes of Dougie. There's Johanna Kirk, who did very well in Northern Traverse. So, and James, who came third at Lakeland 100 this year. So there's some very good runners that know how to go distance and will pace themselves, that either of those are likely and possible to come through for podium or higher if one of us three blow up and drop out like it happened last year. So it's going to be fantastic for dot watching, that's for sure. Always is.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm working on the media team with Will and the rest of the guys, so I'll be pointing cameras and video cameras at you at some point. So I'll you'll see me pop up somewhere during the race, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Just before we go, then, do you want to direct anyone to your website or any of your social media or anything like that, people to get in touch with you?
No, just enjoy the dot watching at the Spine, and yeah, let's hopefully enjoy all the pictures and the media that comes out of it, and the grimaces and the rain or the snow or whatever it throws at us as we try and challenge us to get through the sleep monsters and to all the way to Kirkyato.
Yeah, brilliant.
Hopefully I've managed to learn and succeed.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting. I really appreciate you giving us the time to come on.
No worries, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Kim. Cheers.